Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry to interrupt your lovely conversations, but I am going to get us started so that we can honor the time and hopefully get through all of this information and leave plenty of time at the end for your questions, and I know that you all have them. So let me open us with a word of prayer. Would you all pray with me? Generous God, we gather with grateful hearts. We give thanks for your faithful provision of everything that we need. We are grateful to be part of a cloud of witnesses you have called to this place for generations. We are thankful for those people who modeled your love in this church, for people who have worked for your love in the world, people who have taught us and cared for us and paved the way for us. We are grateful for your own example, for your teaching that we should do justice and love kindness and walk forward in humility. God, we are grateful for the grace we receive even when we fall short. We are grateful that you continue to use us, to call us to be a people of love. Grateful that you set a path before us as a church and that we can run forward together in joy. God, bless this food and all the hands that were involved in preparing it. Bless this time and our conversation this afternoon, and bless us when we go. Amen. You have on your tables some of the slides here, but not all. So I'm going to ask you to follow along with me up here until we get to some of the more number-heavy slides. Then I know you're not going to be able to see them up here, so you have the data sets there on your table. But in general, the purpose of our lunch is so that you all see each other and we have a chance to talk. You all are not all of our College of Elders. This is about 120 people in the room, and we have 360-ish in our College of Elders. So you're roughly a third of our College of Elders, quick math. And it is, as you all remember, a lifetime role. So once you're ordained to serve in our church and in Christ Church, you're an elder for life. So we always want to make sure that you as a community are connected to what's going on. And as you know, we need your help. So sometimes we will call the full College of Elders into service, particularly for things like serving communion. So today I want to start with gratitude. I always do. Every moderator's report at every session meeting, I start by giving thanks. And you'll see in the slides here that some of our conversation about goals and where we are as a church is going to weave back and forth and connect with the resources we have as a church, including the financial resources. I am so thankful to be able to say that we as a church have enough. We have enough. We have enough financial resources. We have enough talent. We have enough time. We may not always feel like it, but we do. And we have enough love to do what God is calling us to do as a congregation. And whatever else we might be working on, whatever decisions we have to make and whatever programs we plan, we must never lose sight of the fact that God has given us exactly what we need to be in this place. We do not have to live in fear. We do not have to be stuck in a mode of scarcity. And that has not always been the case here. So I want to give thanks for that. And note that in some of the past years, we haven't talked about money, or we've talked about money in a way that was anxiety producing. We have to keep talking about money. It's part of our reality as a community together. But I want to give thanks that this year we had our commitment campaign basically outward facing for 1 month, the month of October. That y'all should be clapping for. We did follow up by email and through our volunteer efforts from our call team for the month of November and a little bit in December. And we surpassed our commitment campaign goal before the end of the calendar year. Which is so great. There's still room for growth. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But I want to celebrate that first because, as you all have heard me say so many times, That rhythm lets us be focused on commitment for a season, but then not have that sort of messaging layered on top of everything else we're doing for months and months and months and months. And it also importantly lets our session build a budget and adopt a budget in January, which is the beginning of the year. So our session on January 20th at its stated meeting adopted the 2026 operating budget. And I'm so pleased to say that we had plenty of pledged commitment and other anticipated revenue to fund 100% of the requests from all of our ministry areas this year. There's still, yeah, that's great. Hallelujah. Yeah. We're in a good place. There have been seasons in the life of church, and maybe particularly mainline Protestant church, where the main metric for whether a church was healthy was membership and a very strong emphasis on growth. That's not the only way to measure the health of church, of course. So before I talk about growth, I want to say that caveat that there are so many things that are indicators of the health and well-being and life going on in a church. That said, we are actually growing. We are growing in number. And amazingly, in spite of what you all might be hearing and reading in podcasts and articles and op-eds that are all basically preparing us for the death of the church, we are growing at every age demographic within our membership. So when we see a new member class, and we actually have one next Sunday, don't we, Lucy? We see in every new member class everything from couples who are thinking about maybe someday getting engaged, all the way to people who have been part of some church community for 80 years. And that's remarkable. We in this church world hear from our peers that that's not the case everywhere. So I want to celebrate that that is happening here. And I want to thank you, because that is happening in large part because when people come here, they are greeted, they are welcomed, somebody speaks to them, somebody first of all realizes that they're new, that's an important piece. And then if they come back, someone says, I met you last week, I'm so glad you came back. Can I tell you about X? Where's Jenny Hobbs? Did she make it in here? I just left Jenny Hobbs doing this in the sanctuary just now with a couple who've been visiting, and she happened to know their child and Evelyn Hobbs played soccer together. And instead of just saying, hey, good to see y'all, Jenny's like, hey, let me talk to you and get your email on our list, which is great. But they have already a deeper connection to us because of just that little bit of extra time spent. When we do new member classes, that's the number one thing we hear from people about why they're interested in joining. They were looking for stuff, yes. I would say 100% of people who visit a church in this era have already worshiped with that church online. So before anybody makes their way into our sanctuary or the loft, they've checked us out. They've looked at the website, they've listened to sermons, they know something about what's available, they've probably even done a little bit of research about us, and then they come. And if they come and feel like this place cares that they've come, then that usually leads them all the way into our community. We do that really well, I will say. Your pastors are some friendly folks. Those two are cracking up in the back. What am I going to do with you? But we, by no means, are the first or last people to visit with visitors. It's you. So thank you very much for taking the time and for representing our church well, and for going to that extra step of not just, hey, nice to meet you, but how can I help you get the information you need? Can I sit with you? Can I walk with you to show you where the classroom is, whatever that is? That is really why we're growing. I've already said a little bit about the money, and I'm going to hold on that because I have someone I want to introduce to you in just a minute. We do still have opportunity, particularly in terms of our participation. There's always the opportunity for more dollars given. But we are at a threshold, a little bit of a plateau, I would say, in the number of pledging households who are participating in our congregation. So next year's goal may focus as much on participation as it does on dollars. I want to thank you all for your support, your financial support, your leadership, your time, your talents, all the things that you do that make this place go. We are a pretty devoted and active and loving staff, but we are still by no means enough people to do all of this. This is a church of doers. And that's one of the things I tell people when they ask me about this church. I say it's a member-led church. People here show up for each other, and it's beautiful. It's a witness, I would say. I know that's an unpopular word in some areas, but it is a witness. I want to thank the other folks who are going to speak today. And first, I want to introduce somebody. Tommy, would you come up for a second? This is Tommy Foster, who is our brand new Director of Finance and Administration. Tommy came to us from a pretty similar, not quite the same title, but almost the same job at First Baptist Marietta. So he knows church and he knows realm and he knows budgets. He's also an accountant. He is learning the difference between Baptist and Presbyterian. But we got, how many former Baptists in the room? It's a big number. Yeah, Tommy. Yeah, you see. You can come over too. You can come over too. Tommy's going to talk about the money in 1 second, and I want to thank Frank first, who's the current chair of our trustees, and Cindy Ferguson and Tom Jones, who are leading our planned giving efforts, all of whom are going to say a few words in just a minute. I am going to turn this over to Tommy. Tommy, I'm going to click for you, and if you all will hold your questions to the end, we'll leave some space for them. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, it's great to be here. I'm super excited about the things that I can do for your church. To make a long story short, I struggled all my life with how do I serve my church, and never could find that spot that I felt like God led me to. And it was just an odd thing that I became the financial administrator at my prior church, my home church. It was mostly due to moving and COVID at the same time. But what I discovered was that was my place. That was my place to serve. And I enjoyed it immensely. I spent 20 years in corporate finance, and every day you're struggling to add another penny to the earnings per share. Somewhat fulfilling, but not quite as much as maybe serving your church in the same capacity. So I'm thrilled to be here. And first, I want to thank Martha Kraft, my friend from Marietta High School. So we played the French horn together. So I sat to her right for a couple of years, enjoyed it very much. Okay, so those of you that came to the last town hall, this slide is exactly the same. So, which is a good thing because it means that your church is stable and financially in a very good place. I'm not going to go through all these numbers, but one thing that I do want to point out is that the church is an extremely good financial position. I also invite you, one of the things that struck me in the job description was the word transparency. And I have to keep some items like giving to myself, but the most important thing is if you ever have any questions about any financials that you're looking at, if a number seems odd to you, feel free to visit my office. I love visits. Send me an email. I love to help people understand the financials so that they can feel good about what's happening in their church. This is the current statement of activities. And as you can see, this is a year-over-year comparison. So I've got a little bit of growth on the revenue side, and thankfully a little growth on the expense side as well. We finished up the year about $600,000 favorable. Of course, that's wonderful. But most important thing about setting a church budget is that your budget should be driven off of your mission, and what you'd like to do. So when you set a church budget, you really want to see execution. And you might say, well, maybe we didn't execute very well, but usually, and this was the same in the church, my home church, is that you plan for a full staff of personnel, and sometimes it takes you a while to get there. So when you have that delay, you end up favorable because most of the church's expenses are in the personnel area. So not necessarily a bad thing to be extremely favorable, but trust me, being favorable is much better than being unfavorable. Thank you.
It's good to see so many elders here, and I had no idea there were over 300 of them. Being an elder is a great privilege, and very recently I discovered perhaps the greatest privilege that comes with being an elder. And that was 2 weeks ago when I had a granddaughter baptized here, and I got to represent the session in introducing her to you all, and I was completely thrilled by that. My other great job at Trinity is chair of the Trinity Trust. Some of you may know a lot about the trust, but I suspect most of you don't know very much, so I'm going to spend just a few minutes kind of giving you a brief introduction. The trust was created in 1960 with the purpose of holding and managing financial assets for the church. There are 7 trustees whose responsibility it is to oversee the trust. This is the current slate of trustees. We replace one every year. One retires, one's added, and these are our current years that our terms end. The trustees have just a few duties. One is to oversee the investments, which we do using an advisory board, which I'll get to in a moment. The other is to confirm that when requests are made to the trust, that they conform to the intent of the various funds that we have. And in a moment, I'll show you what those are. We then take a request that we've approved to the session where final approval is required, and if it passes there, then money is dispersed. And our final duty is to encourage gifts to the trust. The trust has grown steadily over the years, and we'll show you what it looks like in a moment, mainly through gifts, bequests, memorials from members into the trust itself. The trust is broken up into a number of funds. There's, first of all, about half of it is a general fund. This is unrestricted. About 4% of this fund is distributed every year into the church's operating budget. That number last year, as you saw on Tommy's slide, was about $210,000, somewhere between 4 and 5% of the church's annual operating budget. There are also 11 designated funds. They have restrictions on them. Each of them is to be used for a specific purpose. And as I mentioned, part of our job is to make sure that they are used for that purpose. So we also distribute about 4%, or our aim is to distribute about 4% from each of these funds every year. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes a request doesn't come in. Sometimes the organization that's in need doubles up in one year, and then the next year they don't make a request. But over time, to maintain the health and continue the growth in the trust, we shoot for about 4%. These are what the balances look like over the last 3 years. The beginning balance, contributions, the distributions that were made, and then the investment gains and the final balance total. So at the end of 2025, we were a little, 12.8 million. And as you can see, it's grown tremendously over the last 3 years. So we've benefited from a very strong stock market. We've also benefited from some various generous gifts. And that distribution line, as you can see, it hasn't risen linearly, but it has been growing. And last year we contributed in total about $350,000 to the church for its use. That's 210 from the general fund, and then all those other designated funds gave us that total. Now, just as a point of comparison, you may wonder, well, is this like other churches? Is this typical? most churches, at least in our denomination, have no endowment at all. So they have no contribution to the church's budget from these financial assets like we have. At the other end of the spectrum, as you might guess, there are some churches, particularly older ones in the Northeast and the East Coast, that have tremendous endowments. And I've talked to trustees from some of these other churches where as much as 30, 40, even 50% of their operating budget comes from proceeds from their endowment. I think we could have a discussion about whether or not that's healthy, but that just puts it into a little perspective about where we stand compared to other churches. And now I'm going to turn this over to Cindy and Tom to talk about planned giving. Still deciding who's talking?
Impressive group. Good afternoon. For your protection, this is about 5 minutes, so if I go over that, let me know. I'm going to start out by suggesting kind of a working definition for planned giving, because it's not something that's on the tip of everybody's tongue, and there are literally scores of definitions that you can find online and elsewhere. But the one that I like to use, and it's one that I've given some thought to, is a planned gift is one that first is significant to the giver. So it needs to be a significant gift from the standpoint of the giver. It's over and above the person's annual gift to the Trinity Operating Fund, your annual pledge. And third is made with joy. I think that's three pretty good criteria for a planned gift. Significance to you as a giver, over and above your annual pledge, and made with joy. So what is significant in this context? There's no minimum or maximum dollar amount, obviously. Rather, it's a gift that you should, I think, feel a little bit of a stretch when you make it, but one that's right for you and your family. So it's a circumstantial analysis. It's one that's dependent on your particular financial and family situation. Second component of the definition, that it be over and above your annual pledge to Trinity, is probably pretty obvious, but I think it's one that needs to be stated. Trinity simply can't function with our annual pledge gifts, and anything that detracts from that is going to be counterproductive. So please don't let your planned gift detract from your annual pledge. I'd suggest, though, that the third prong of the definition is probably the most important, and that is that the gift be made with joy. The widow who Jesus observed in the Jerusalem temple, giving her last mite to the poor, I visualize her as making her gift with a bright, shining face and a subtle little smile. So there's nothing wrong with experiencing personal satisfaction when you make your planned gift. In fact, if there's no joy in the act, there's definitely something missing. Parenthetically, I also think of the Magi's gift to the Christ child as being a pretty darn well planned gift. I mean, these gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh were carefully planned months in advance and delivered with the guidance of a very helpful star. Unfortunately, we don't have such a star to offer, but we will, I think you'll see on the screen certain ways that planned gifts can be made. And we'll be happy to go over those in detail with you personally. Generally, though, the gift does not have to be complicated at all. In fact, it can be in just the form of a check made during your lifetime. The largest, most significant gift that we've had to the Trinity Trust was made in just this simple, straightforward way. In 2024, you may have seen that kind of significant blip in our asset column in 2024. Alternatively, a one-sentence designation in your retirement account, your IRA account, your life insurance policy, or a simple bequest, just a one-sentence bequest in your will work very well. So you can't really make the excuse that, oh, this is so complicated, I can't figure this out. It's not that way. We're planning a number of educational opportunities at Trinity around plan giving this coming Friday at men's breakfast, which I consider a target-rich audience. We've got a person coming from Presbyterian Foundation who's going to talk about plan giving and estate planning in general. And George Hopfuhrer, where's George? George was helpful in arranging that for us. Thank you, George. It's important to note that we're encouraging folks to make their planned gifts to the Trinity Presbyterian Trust Fund, which is distinct from the church, but joined at the hip really with the church, and more specifically to the general fund within the trust fund. That's the one that can be used for any purpose to support Trinity. It's not restricted to a particular use or purpose. Thereby providing maximum flexibility to meet Trinity's future needs as they arise. I think Frank also mentioned that the General Trust Fund doesn't do all the heavy lifting, but it does give significant support to our annual budget here at Trinity. The gifts that you would make to the General Fund are invested for the long term with people here at Trinity that are professionals in this area and give a lot of attention to being conservative, but also permitting growth of the fund to occur, and with the goal of keeping these funds in place in perpetuity. I think that's very important because in this way your gift can grow in value over time, and it keeps giving long after you've been promoted to the church triumphant, if you know what I mean. Eleanor and I find it personally very satisfying to think about our planned gift still having an impact into the far distant future. Cindy Ferguson and I, and all of our Trinity trustees are excited about the prospect of having conversations, as many conversations as possible, with as many of you as possible. And we want to engage with you at the time and in the manner that you're most comfortable with. We will judge our success largely by the quantity, but more importantly, the quality of those conversations. And please remember that no person is too young, too old, too rich, or too poor to make a pledge gift to Trinity Presbyterian Church. Cindy.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, everybody. Just so you know, I'm not one of the skilled people that work in the financial numbers piece that Tom mentioned. We do have a team. I think it was on Frank's slide of the folks who are really managing the investment. So what I'm here to do is try and inspire you. If you have not considered a planned gift yet for Trinity, and I know I'm preaching to the choir to a lot of you because I've seen the list of those who have let the church know that they've already made a planned gift, and many of you are in this room, so thank you for that. So if you've been thinking about it and you need a little nudge to understand what impact a planned gift can make, I'm here to try and help you see that. We can all appreciate that having a trust fund is beneficial to our operating budget. But I want to try and explain just how valuable that $210,000 that we were able to draw off the general fund in 2025, just how beneficial it is to our budget. This chart here shows for you over the last 7 years the amount of money based around a 4% draw off whatever the balance of the general fund is, has been added into the income for the operating budget. So back in 2019, that total was $98,000. And just in the last 6 years, you can see that the growth of the general fund and the wise investment of it have led to a total of $210,000 now going into our budget. So more than twice, what we were looking at back in just 6 years ago. So it's important to recognize what that $210,000 can represent. And what I'd like to do is if we could go back to the statement of activities slide for a second. So you'll see that the 210 is listed up in the income section for our total trust fund income. And if you look down in the expenses, and you just look at ministry to the congregation, children and families, youth and families, ministry to adults, and worship and music, I did add those up on a calculator twice, so I think I've got a good number for you. But that total just for those ministries is about $230,000. So that 210 from the general fund almost covers those ministries. And we would have to come up with another way, more commitment perhaps from our members if we wanted to maintain the same programming in all those areas with the same expenses. It would be hard without that money. But every time we make a gift into that general fund and that fund grows, the amount of money that we can then add back into our operating budget and offset our expenses is really, really valuable. So, we've talked a lot about the general fund, but we also have the mission and property funds that are somewhat restricted, but also really meaningful funds if you're feeling more drawn to supporting any of those funds. All of these funds are meaningful and important, but they really are a lot more than just money that goes back into the budget, because the funds represent gifts that our members have felt compelled and inspired to give. And, I'm hopeful that if you have not already felt that call, that you will look for one of us, seek us out so that we can talk to you about the different ways that you could do that. We don't have to know anything about what your numbers might be. It's really just an act of thinking ahead and recognizing what those who have gone before us have given to the fund, allowing us to do so much of what we can do now. I want to also note there's a little planned giving brochure on your table, and we have a quote from our dear and faithful Eve Eckhart. I don't know if she's here today, but I'm going to read it for you because I think it talks a lot about what a planned gift does. Eve had said, "I love the old saying that we make at least a start on discovering the meaning of human life when we plant shade trees under which we know full well we will never sit." So, the money that has come from a lot of these funds came after someone passed and they left a gift to the church, which is, of course, incredibly meaningful. But I want to remind you that you do not have to die to make a gift. We have had some incredibly meaningful gifts, lifetime gifts, that someone has felt called to give, and the joy that you get to experience doing that while you're alive, and the benefit of seeing your gift in action as you engage in the life of the church is really meaningful. So remember, you can make a lifetime gift and one when you go. We'll take them both. So if you've already made your gift a planned gift, you've got that somewhere in your will, your estate, thank you for that. You're going to benefit a lot of people who come after you. And if you haven't, please see one of us. We would love to help you. I hope you're feeling a little more called, compelled, or inspired. And thank you.
New commitment campaign slogan: you don't have to die to give to Trinity. Perfect. Thank you, Cindy. I have the joy of getting to talk about what happens with these resources that are shared with our church, because we don't ask for money or raise money or collect money to hold it or just for its own sake. It is all to be put toward God's mission, of course, in the world. So before I do some looking back at the commitment campaign and then talk about this year's budget, I wanted to go over some highlights from what has come in the last couple of years. So 2024 and 2025, some of the bigger stuff that we added or did in addition to the things that are always happening to keep this organization moving. We added a wellness and recreation ministry and also a director position for that wellness and recreation ministry. How many of you have come to a class or done yep, some of you, okay, not as many. Well, let me tell you, there's a whole lot of wellness and recreation being offered here and expanding all the time. So it's also for the community. It isn't just for the members of our church, and is a really important outreach to our families. So the children who are here during the day for school, many of their parents are working and wish that they had a longer day, and they're going to pay for enrichment activities for those kids somewhere. So we have added that and have a full range of enrichment activities here as well. And then there's a whole big respite care I'm going to hold that to talk about that will fall under our wellness and rec ministries. We increased our grants budget for impact grants. How many of you have ever read applications for impact grants? Yeah, quite a few, and they're all clustered back here just about. This is in addition to the financial support and relationships we maintain with our mission partners. We support how many this year? 12 this year. Other organizations who are doing really wonderful, important work in our community. And that's a good way for us to think about mission, right? Because there are some things that God is asking us to do, but there are also resources we have that can be shared with someone who's already doing it and doing it really well. And we don't believe that God's plan is for us to create everything new from whole cloth and to own it ourselves. And this is a recognition of what we have that can be put to use to support something that's already in place and going well in our community. So we've increased the impact grant budget. We've also increased our regular support for our permanent mission partners, and we have really activated our campus. So we're not quite close, but not quite finished with the infrastructure campaign work that was started back in 2021. We still have a little bit of HVAC and a little bit of security, which may just be true for all time, that we have HVAC and security work to do. But most of the work that we were planning to do with this building, with our campus, has happened. And we now open it for all kinds of purposes, to gather not only our members, but to gather the community, to lend it to groups that don't have their own spaces, and let people have basically our space as their missional resources. Last year, we added significant children's worship materials in all our worship spaces. You heard our kids. Didn't they do a fantastic job today? Man, they are so smart and so brave, and I'm so moved every time I hear them. But you heard them as they were starting to read scripture. They said, we're reading from the Spark Bible, which we use in our classrooms and you have in your pews. Now, I don't know how many of you actually got the Spark Bible out and followed along with them, but that was an addition in 2025. We added children's Bibles at 2 reading levels, one that's mostly picture Bible, and then the Spark Bible, which is for readers. We put them in our pews so our kids can follow along and our kids can be worshiping with us. Or if, heaven forbid, they feel bored during the sermon, they can just read the Bible. That's great. I support that. That's how my own children have made it through, having to listen to me for their whole lives. And we've also expanded our worship with children at the 9 o'clock. So there are different furnishings and art and reading and bookshelves and all kinds of stuff that's really meant to engage them during worship in the loft space. We expanded our band. How many of you have heard the 9 o'clock band? Okay, next time we do this, I want to see 100% of hands up, because this church, we love music. Do we? We love music so much at Trinity. And I just want to put in a plug for the exceptional music we have in every single worship service, in every single space in which we worship here. It is stellar. In fact, quick plug, our Assistant Director of Music for Informal Worship, Brittany Boykin, had to miss today because she is at the Grammys, where she is nominated for 2 Grammys. Robert Boone, who's our percussionist at the 9 o'clock service, already has a Grammy. Norman has, who knows how many Grammys Norman has. More than one. So all that is to say, we expanded our band so that that is now a permanent group of musicians. They play together and they are exceptional. And the folks who worship there regularly know them and vice versa. We finally, it was a little painful, but we finally got the migration complete to Realm and got rid of the old database, ACS, which doesn't exist anymore. There are still opportunities for engagement here. And one of the easiest is pictures. How many of you have had your picture taken or have put your own picture in? Okay, this is another place where we got to get 100% of hands up. How many of you want to be able to see a picture of everybody when you look it up? Yep. So you see the disconnect between the number of hands who've done it and the number of hands who want it. Realm is a great tool. It isn't a perfect tool, but it is a great tool. Most of you are using it to find each other, which is beautiful. That's what community is about. And we need more pictures in there. More and more of our committees are starting to use it as their organizing tool. So to send out meeting reminders, agendas, even to store documents, so that you're not like, who has the Dropbox link for this committee? The members of the committee can be in a group in Realm, and all of the documents that are relevant to their work are stored in Realm, and you can access them easily and from your phone. So we've done the first hard launch, but now we have some additional layers of participation to build there. We have a new graphic designer on contract as of about a year ago, so you'll notice that some of our stuff, as you were hoping would happen, is intentionally looking the same. So our branding guidelines are now being carried through all our communications. You may not have noticed this because it's subtle, but of our brand colors, different colors, Lucy's laughing that I'm sharing this, different colors are used for different ministry areas so that you can always recognize, that is a youth email or that is a mission email. That's how detailed our use of our brand is. We had a whole session of our session, a whole session retreat devoted to strategic planning for our adult education offerings, and have landed with a 3 per Sunday new rhythm as of about a year ago, maybe a little less, so that we have the mostly presentation-based class in this space, which is live streamed, a Bible-based, member-led discussion in the chapel parlor, and then the connections group meets in A116. And they choose their own content. Sometimes it's a podcast, sometimes it's an article, and they come and talk. So instead of the old model where you're on a list somewhere that's on a clipboard and you're present or absent for learning that day, you're welcome to come to whichever of those strikes you, whether you're choosing because of the topic and it's interesting to you, or because you like a particular format. One of the things that I hope we'll get to do very soon this year that is in the budget is to add a staff person to support our adult education and to take us back to a broader set of offerings for spiritual formation. Because formation doesn't all happen at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. In fact, sometimes 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning is a direct conflict. I'm looking at you, choir. I know you would love to come to learning stuff, but you are committed elsewhere at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. We can hear you through the ceiling. It's a good thing. Y'all sound great. So this new staff person will help create additional offerings that aren't all in that same mode. And it has been a good while since we have regularly created new study and small groups. We have lots that are rocking. We've had lots that are committed to each other and have been together for years. We have Bible study, we have theology reading group, we have awakenings, we have meditation. We have lots that really are thriving. But we also have a lot of new people, back to my comment earlier about our growth. And so when that happens, we need to be able to start something new to offer them the smaller space that meets their learning and formation needs. So we'll be adding a staff person to help coordinate all that and to figure out who needs an invitation, who needs to be in which new space. And then finally, this last bullet, renovations. I'm sure you're going to be glad when they're all done. But we did the 5 Points restrooms, the upstairs staff restrooms, carpet, paint in the rotunda, both parlors, the bride and groom's rooms, the manse, the HVAC. And we budgeted more so that we wouldn't have to defer all the maintenance and have another capital campaign. Thanks be to God. So those are some backward-looking things that have happened in the last 2 years. This feels like a long time ago now, but this was our 2026 commitment campaign theme. Do y'all remember it? Anyone remember what the scripture was? Hebrews, I heard it. Oh, it was Bonnie. A plus, Bonnie. It was Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith, who for the sake of joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. One of my favorite passages in Scripture, because it is both backward and forward looking. It reminds us, just as this quote from Eve says, that we sit under trees that we did not plant, and it compels us forward to plant trees that others will sit under and enjoy. And these were the goals that were part of the campaign this year. So this is what's really on our plate for 2026. Expanding our faith in action. That group is working so hard all the time, and you all are invited to join in the many opportunities to serve, to advocate, to be about policy change, particularly around housing and health care for all Georgians and creation care and record restriction and support for our neighbors who are returning after incarceration. We have all kinds of activity going there. And as money goes, it's not terribly expensive, but it is an important, essential, bedrock part of who we are and what we do. And we are able to put more financial resources there. Our creation care team is going gangbusters, and we have added a line for them into the budget, which is great, and continue to meet our mission partner support as an increase each year. I just talked about the next bullet, adding a director of education and spiritual formation. As Tommy said, people are expensive. What are the biggest buckets in our budget? Number one is people. Number two, the facilities. Yep. Was that a chair of property that said that over here? Hank Hall, yes. Facilities are number two, and then mission is third. And that actually is sort of a good snapshot of what it looks like to be together in a community. We are also funding, as I said a few minutes ago, care and wellness ministries, and hopefully at the end of 2026, or if not this year, at the beginning of 2027, we will launch a respite care ministry program. Who knows what respite care is? Okay, good. I didn't want to bore you, but respite care is a huge need in our community. More and more of our loved ones are experiencing memory challenges that draw people away from community and are isolating, and even sometimes make people think they don't get to participate in the learning and fellowship that have been core to their identities. And respite care, which is not what it will be called, that's what it is, but it will have a different name, allows people to come together safely and supportively, and it gives people who regularly have caregivers and the caregivers a break from each other. If you are doing caregiving or receiving caregiving, you know that this is really important. It is a heavy thing to help each other through hard times. And sometimes it is really meaningful to get away from that setting, to not be a patient going to doctor's appointments all the time, to gather to do something fun without an agenda. And then on the flip side, to be someone who's present to support that. There are several of these around the city, and they are all full with a wait list. So I'm hopeful that we can launch and we'll very quickly be able to meet some of the need, both within our own church and in our broader community. That has a pretty significant price tag to do that, both because of the programmatic requirements and because of the facilities requirements. If I talk about the long, dark hall in D building, do you know where I'm talking about? Well, after this, I will walk there with anyone who wants to go see. There's a long hallway. If you come past the chapel, past the parlor, and around that little wonky curve where the staircase is, there's a long hall there. A little bit of the way down, you have the entrance to the gym, which is also where our preschool is. That space is locked during the week for the security of the children who are students here. And then if you keep going down that hall, there's a room on the left that usually has our labyrinth rolled out on the floor. And then there are 2 suites of like rabbit warren offices, one that was once Lifespan, one that was a basketball and rec office at one point, one was a counseling and care space. So they've had different lives. They're totally unused at present. Nothing is happening down there. The spaces are very broken up, so they're not actually easy to use for lots of purposes. So we're working with some architects to convert those into spaces that can be used for respite care and for our wellness and rec ministries. The expensive piece of this is that we need restrooms. There are no restrooms that serve that wing. Think about it for a second. If you've come into worship at the chapel and you were 5 minutes out from the start of worship and you had to use the restroom, your choices were either the single restroom that's outside the chapel parlor or inside the bride's room, or you had to come to 5 Points. And 5 Points is a long way from the chapel parlor, particularly for some of our folks with mobility limitations. So we're going to be adding some restrooms that will not only serve respite care, but will also support that whole chapel wing, so that when we have funerals and weddings and worship services and we have 200 people coming to the chapel, they can quickly use the restroom without us having to send chaperones to show them where 5 Points is. That's a little awkward, believe me, when you have to walk someone to the potty. We're going to continue to expand chapel worship. So I hope you've noticed we're going to have actually a service there tonight at 6:30 with our clergy neighbors up and down the North Side corridor. But we've been having at least one service there per month, Vespers on a Sunday night, all different formats, but activating that chapel space. How many of y'all love to worship in the chapel? Yeah, me too. It's just a beautiful space. Of course, it's so resonant for music, but we're trying to build a rhythm around that in addition to our Sunday morning. And then I talked about security and maintenance, and we have had to expand our spending in administration, finance, and communications. Mostly the big add is the cost of our insurance. It is an expensive insurance market at the moment, and that's something that we cannot live without, insurance. So these were the goals, and these are some of the things that we're working on moving through 2026. I'm going to keep going. I know your eyes might be glazing over. You have this on your tables if you want to see these numbers. I want to do a quick look back at how the commitment campaign went that was to support the 2026 operating budget. So I've given you there 2 columns. You can see the 2025 campaign numbers and the 2026 campaign numbers. We increased our goal from 4 million to 4.15 million. The amount pledged increased from 4,040,000 to almost 4,300,000. So that's a nice big increase year over year. What's interesting, perhaps, about it, and I can do a deep dive if any of you really want to get into these weeds, is that that came almost from the same number of pledges. So 471 pledges received for 25, 474 for 26. 176 of those pledges were flat year over year, same amount. 44 households decreased their pledge. Almost 200 households increased their pledge. 52 are pledges that were not renewed. We did not get a pledge back for a number of reasons. Some of those are people who pledged for 25 and just did not for 26. Some of them will give even though they don't pledge. Some of those are deaths. Those are some households that had pledged for 25 and those people are not with us anymore, promoted to the church triumphant. And some of those are households that have moved away or are not members of our church anymore. almost the same number as our new pledges. So 55 households pledged for 26 who had not pledged for 2025. I think this stuff is interesting, so if you want to talk about it, happy to. Here's our membership, just for reference. We have to report this annually to the presbytery, so these are the numbers that are in our statistical reports. We were just at 1,600. These are adult active members, so confirmands up. And then a year later, we're at 1,640. So this is net. This is after we have taken out anybody who's transferred their membership away from us and anyone who's died. So that's a nice, healthy number of new members year over year. Then on top of that, because we're Trinity and we're special, we have 140 affiliate and non-member spouses who are people who are participating with us and are active here, but are not technically members here. Like, for example, one, Joel Lamont. He's real active. He's just not a member. On top of that, we have 465 unconfirmed children in our midst. Hallelujah. Y'all, 500 children younger than 8th grade in this church. I think that's awesome. Per capita is always something people ask in these settings, so I just threw it up here. Last year it was $31.36 a member. This year it's $32.76. It's roughly $50,000 for us per year. Then our total budgets year over year, 4.551 to 4,827,356. That's broken out as a cost per member or a cost per household, if you're curious about where you are on this. I'm going to keep going, and then we'll be ready for questions. These data are from the budgets that were passed for 2025 and 2026. Some of this you've seen in other people's slides, so I won't go through the entire thing. But the big buckets of our revenue are on the top. Pledged income, unpledged income, which comes from a number of sources, trust fund income, which we've talked about, and then this other income is a mix. It's interest, it's fees we receive, it's use of our building, it's people paying to participate in things that we have here, which add up to a nice, healthy, almost $250,000 for 2026. And then I just included the general categories from our operating budget so that you can see how they fall out in comparison with each other, but also how they're increasing. We're spending more on children's ministry. We're spending more on our worship and music. We're spending significantly more on mission year over year. Not that much more on property, which is the great stewardship of lots of people who are in this room. And then an increase, but really a modest increase on the personnel line from $2,150,000 to $2,260,000 year over year. This budget was just adopted by this session in January. And if you are a person who likes to see the detail, it is public. Our budget is always public. We are happy to send it to you. It is long, long, long. So I didn't want to put it on a screen or on your tables. But if you would like to see it or talk about it, please reach out to Tommy or me. It is absolutely your information to know. And that is our presentation for today. And I'm going to take questions. And if you have questions for these other people, they'll take questions too. What would you all like to know? Charlie. Hang on, Charlie. Wait a second. Let's get you a mic. Which one, Lucy? Orange. Orange mic. C3. P.O. Good joke.
Sometimes we have to humor her a little bit.
Just
There's
you.
a lot of people in this room that can remember back 30 years ago or so when this place was literally falling apart. It was interesting to see the Carson Trust
Major
Fund.
maintenance fund.
We had 1 year where if that is there for extraordinary maintenance things, we had 1 year where $700,000 boiler thing. And when you alluded to the fact that thank goodness these buildings are in such good shape because we don't want to have another capital campaign, that was not the way we were moving.
Yep.
When we had that Joanna capital campaign, we said we're going to set some money aside in a maintenance reserve. And the idea was that every time, that we wouldn't have capital campaigns every time we needed, several $100,000.
HVAC,
Now,
right.
with $3 million in the bank and only $400,000 of that being prepaid pledges, that's nice, but is there, Hank is right here and Mark is somewhere. Are we not putting money in restricted, literally funds in a restricted cash account for these type of things and not have to draw on Carson 800,000 or whatever because the HVAC and the roofs and all that someday will need to be replaced, and I don't think a capital campaign for just that is too appealing to people.
Amen to that last bit. Nobody wants to raise money just for the HVACs, I promise. The short answer is yes, we are putting aside money in multiple places for this, but for the first time, we're not, I can't say that we're totally dollar for dollar where we need to be to avoid needing a capital campaign. That's probably not realistic. But we are budgeting at a faithful level for our annual maintenance so that the things that led to those extremes should be less likely. That's one thing. And we're looking at a 20-year capital expense budget. So that in theory, we also won't get surprised by those things where all of a sudden you come in and it's a 0-degree wind chill day and the boiler doesn't work. That may happen, but we're doing what we can to avoid that. The major maintenance fund is one support pocket for that. There's also a major maintenance line within our annual operating budget so that we're not always using reserves to do this work. We're using annually budgeted money as well. And we have had 4 good years in a row. So Tommy alluded to the fact that there will be unspent funds from the 2025 year end that session will need to allocate. We don't do that until we've already had our annual review, which happens in the summer. Then we top off our operating reserves before we allocate any unspent funds. But that will be, for the 4th year in a row, a good number. Some of that because of underspending in a few areas, but even more because of unbudgeted giving. We got more than people had pledged year over year. Those funds are also allocated by session, and in the past, they have been, some years they had to all go to property. Y'all remember, right, where it was an emergency, and every bit of money that could be pulled into it had to go to property. But for recent years, session has been dividing unspent funds, putting some into another property reserve, putting some into a personnel reserve, some into the mission reserve, and some into a communications and technology reserve. Because realistically, every bit of technology we're using is depreciating quickly in real time. So we end up with 3 good buckets to cover some of that money. I wish I could say we'll never need another capital campaign to do anything on the campus. I can't say that, but I do think we've changed the practice to make it less likely and less likely that we reach a crisis. Does that help? Yes. Thank you, Charlie.
Are you feeling inspired?
Cindy, that was amazing. Did you want to add something, Tommy? Is that one live?
So that's a perfect segue to what I was thinking. The church that I came from, first of all, not having a building reserve fund adequate to cover all the future maintenance and repairs is extremely common. Most churches are not going to have $20 million in the bank because that's what you need for the next 20 years to maintain your properties. But our church got a $3 million estate gift, unrestricted. And so the church decided to put the $3 million into a designated fund strictly for building reserve. And so that was a good foundation, a good start on having a hefty fund. So you do, anticipate not having to have a fundraising campaign. And that $3 million is throwing off $120,000 of easy interest a year. So again, that's another $120,000 that you can use for the expensive repairs like HVAC and things like that. So if you're thinking about your planned giving and you're also concerned about building reserves, then that's a perfect combination.
Such a good plug. Barrett. Right in the middle of the room. Lucy's coming. Here you go, Barrett.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I'm curious about the small amount of funds in the mission portion of the trust fund, because that fund was started as a part of the large capital expansion that was done whenever, I can't remember the date, but so we put $1 million in it at that point. Now it's dwindled. How did it happen? And what are our plans to try to increase that?
Well, I'll let others speak to how that happened, because I think, not to be glib, the answer is we've been giving it away, which is why it was given to us in the first place, so that we could then support others' needs, missional needs. Bless you. But also, most of what we're giving, if we think about just one aspect of mission is giving, there are lots of others, right? All of what we're doing is missional. But if we're just thinking about what we're giving away, most of what we're giving away is not coming from the trust fund. We are funding the missional giving in our operating budget to the tune of $650,000. And then also these years of unspent funds, Session has been allocating huge chunks of our unspent funds to mission. So there's a very significant mission reserve that's part of our operating budget. And then the mission budget itself is significant in our operating budget. And the trust is really is not our primary way of engaging in missional giving. Frank, did you want to say more about that or come back about it later?
Yeah, I think, Barrett, you're referring to that the fund at the very bottom that only has $79,000 in it? Yeah, that fund was created in the G2G capital campaign 25 years ago. It has been spent down. It does kick off a little bit that's used by mission every year. That is not the only fund that's dedicated to mission, though. The second largest fund, the J. Erskine Love Memorial Fund, established by the Love family, its primary purpose is also for mission work. Well,
the designated fund there for new church development, how does that line up with the Atlanta Area Presbytery? Are we working with them on it? And you look at that when your introduction was talking about churches dying out.
Yep.
I don't see many new churches being developed.
So that fund was created in the boom era when church planting was really much more common than it is now. And to your point, Reynolds, it was normal, right? There were new churches being started all over the place. There is still, as part of our presbytery, an organization called the New Church Development Commission, and they are still supporting the establishment and nurturing of new worshiping communities. And it's really quite a long process for somebody to say, we want to get together and be a church all the way to the point where they are a recognized worshiping community of the PCOSA. That's a long journey. And the NCDC is with them in that journey. I just happen to know this because I was reading my presbytery packet. There are 19 new worshiping communities currently in our presbytery, which is not a small number. I was pleasantly surprised to read that number. Almost, if not all of them, are immigrant communities. So there are not anymore the model of, frankly, how Trinity was started. But there are many communities that are gathering and discerning that they together are actually going to be a church. Very few of them end up with their own property. They are nested inside another church, or they worship in a church at a different time, or not a church at all. Several of them are worshiping in houses, which is actually quite the first century model of how to do church. Frankly, that's taken it all the way back. But all that is to say, the NCDC is still supporting that work, and we have made in the last couple of years distributions that are consistent with what that fund is supposed to disperse. to support the work of the NCDC. And then this past year, we made a distribution to support an organization called Memorial Drive Ministries, which is the physical campus and umbrella organization that supports 6 worshiping communities in their space out. It used to be Memorial Drive Presbyterian Church, if you know where that is, out in Clarkston. Has anybody been there? It is a fantastic organization doing amazing work in the world, and we gave to them to support their efforts so that 6 congregations could benefit from that funding. I will say it's not as prominent. It isn't a thing that comes up as much these days as it once did. Yep, we're doing it. Whenever there's a need that can fit within that funds criteria, we try to use it. Tom.
Our part in the development of the new Ormwood Church
Yes.
is a real success story.
Yeah. Amen. Do y'all know about the Ormwood Church? Yeah. So Janelle Holmes, who was here for a while on our staff, who's a wonderful human and a great pastor. She was the founding pastor of Ormwood, which launched as a new worshiping community and has now chartered and is a congregation of the PCUSA, which is fantastic. And they stayed in a space in the Ormwood neighborhood that basically was going to be repurposed, and the neighbors came together and said, no, we want a church. We need a church that is our neighborhood church, and we want to keep this space. And now they are. Thanks be to God. What else? George. Uh-oh, hang on. I don't think you're on, George.
And
There we go.
I'll stand up too.
Okay, great.
I want to thank you and everyone who has spoken today. I think the transparency is wonderful. I'm sure not every church, provides this kind of information the way Trinity does. So thank you for that.
Of course.
If somebody could pull up the commitment data points slide.
Almost there. Nope. Yep, there we go.
There we go. Good. Over my life, whenever I've, thought about something that I thought was important, I wanted to establish a goal and to try to make periodic progress toward that goal. And as I look at the data on this page, because I am a numbers guy, the amount pledged for 26, 4.3 million, divided by the number of pledges, 474, means that the average pledge is about $9,000, which is wonderful, but we're all different. Some are below, some are above.
Right.
And Trinity itself is anything but average. So, but bear with me. So if somebody is an average giver at $9,000 and they want to endow their pledge the way that Tom Jones talked about, given the 4% payout from the Trinity Trust, the way the math works is you multiply the pledge by 25. And when you do that, 25 times 9,000, 225,000, 225,000 multiplied by a 4% spending rate perpetuates that 9,000 annual pledge. So to go back to what Cindy was saying, if you have that goal, you can start putting money into the general fund of the Trinity Trust or some other vehicle that is during your lifetime. And then whatever else you want to do through your estate, in your will, to achieve whatever your goal might be. So I just wanted to plant that seed with everyone in the room to think about how you want to endow most or all of your pledge when you are in the church triumphant.
Thank you for that good word, George. Such planning also insulates us. We do still have several very, very generous gifts that offset those pledges that are not $9,000, of course. And frankly, while I think those gifts are incredible and we need them and we'll use them faithfully, we also don't want to be dependent on them. So to the extent that people are able and willing to make those plans, it insulates the church from a challenge if we are to lose someone's pledge. Thank you for that witness, George. What other questions do y'all have? Not a one? Okay, well, then I will thank you for being here and for being you here. And I hope it warms up for all our sakes, and I hope you have a wonderful Sunday afternoon. And I'll see some of you at 6:30 for worship.